Hello, everybody. I'm Denora Meyer. I'm one of the assistant directors on the counseling team at the Career Center, and I work with students specifically in the College of Environmental Design, providing programming like this and providing individual career counseling. So if at some point you would like to get help with your career journey, your decision-making, applying for opportunities, you can make an appointment with me through Handshake. Today, we have a special guest, Leah Freisinger, who is a construction project manager. Today's alumni career chat is focused on construction project management. And I also have my colleague, Juan Garcia, who is helping with the tech aspects. Thanks very much, Juan. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, what I'd like to do is ask everybody here, if you could put in the chat what your major is. I know, or I'm familiar with a few of you, but if you could just put in the chat what your major is, then I can know where you're coming from. So we have architecture, landscape architecture, and one that I missed, which is sustainable environmental design. So we have a little bit of a spread, and maybe other people will also come in. Thank you for sharing that. And years that you are in Cal, you know, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, masters. If you could let us know that, that would be great too. We have sophomore, freshman, senior. Okay, so we have a range of class years. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to start off by asking Leah a couple of questions, general questions, just to get the conversation started. And then I'm going to give you each a chance to ask questions, and we'll engage in conversation. And we can keep it it's definitely informal. So feel free to chime in. You can also put questions in the chat, but it's great if you can even come on camera, so it makes it more of a connected experience for everybody. So Leah, first of all, thank you so much for coming and taking the time to speak with us. And we really appreciate it.
No problem.
So the first question I have is just, please tell us about your current work, the nature of the organization where you work, and your role and responsibilities.
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk a lot about my past work experience only because I just changed jobs after 7 years a couple months ago. So a lot of what I'll talk about is probably based on my previous experience. But so what I used to do is I used to work as a project manager for a general contracting firm that did mostly ground up mid-rise buildings, focusing mostly on affordable housing. So ground up meaning completely new build, not a renovation, and then affordable housing as in mostly residential units, sometimes with a community programming space on the first floor or commercial space on the first floor, and then mid-rise meaning typically anywhere from 5 to 9 stories in height. So that was my previous experience. And then what I'm doing now is I'm working for a design build firm as a project manager, which is quite different because, you're working directly with designers, collaborating on the same team, even though we're always on the same team, within the organization. And that I just started in January. So but my typical responsibilities, on the project management side, cost control, schedule management, relationship between the owner and what's going on the construction site, kind of like the front man for ownership or the developer, whoever the client may be at any time. And then trade coordination, making sure that we're all set up to put the tower crane up on a Saturday, all the subcontracts or purchase orders are in place, vendors know what they need to be doing, we have staging areas, just kind of the general kind of background office work for kind of teeing things up for site crew, superintendent, field crew to do what they need to do. So I'm always making sure in the background that like everybody knows what they need to be doing, knows where they need to be, and any troubleshooting, I'm kind of hopefully thinking ahead to, okay, the truck needs to pull up here, but we have this in the way that day, and working with a superintendent typically to kind of make the field work happen. So it's different from day to day.
Great, thank you. And you've already given something of your career trajectory, but maybe you could tell us more in depth about your career path and highlights and
Sure.
how you got to where you are today. Thanks.
Yeah. So I was saying earlier, I went to UC Berkeley for architecture. I got my BA, go Bears. And I knew in school that I did not want to do architecture. I never felt that I was very well suited to it. I knew a lot of kids in school who were really enthusiastic and passionate about architecture and design and drafting and all of those programs. And I definitely did not feel like an architecture nerd at all. I didn't know any architects' names. People would ask me, what's your favorite who's your favorite architect? And I never had one because I had never studied that. I just decided to do it as a major. But I was always very creative and kind of, I felt in my mind, practically creative. Like I really liked the kind of not only creating and thinking through ideas, but kind of the strategy behind it. And I always felt that I really excelled at all the things aside from being a designer, which is I loved giving the presentations. I loved, I liked working with people in studio. I loved, studying, but I never felt like I was a great designer. And I never felt like that was kind of anything I could do at the detail level long term. So coming out of school, I knew I kind of like wanted to do something practical with my degree. Not that architecture isn't, it is very practical, but something less on the kind of creative side. So sorry, I'm curious. I'll tell, oh yeah, okay. So I started working for a very small subcontractor doing high-end custom windows and doors. And that was great because I got a little bit of everything. I would get to meet with clients, which I really liked. I loved being kind of, again, the kind of front man for helping kind of sell the product. I thought it was really fun to take client meetings and show them all the finishes we could do and be there kind of how to, here's what we're thinking. And then I would do the drafting of all of the different windows and doors, helping figure out, okay, how exactly are we going to detail this out? How are we going to install it? And then I also got to go into the field and do a good bit of kind of, in-field on-site work, experiencing the construction life, working with tons of different personalities because there are lots and lots of different people in this industry. And the subcontractor I worked for was very small. And I really am someone who likes to kind of climb the ladder. That's just my personality. I love to kind of keep learning. I get bored quite easily. So I started working for actually a friend I had in civil engineering at Cal. She got me an interview at her company, which was the company I worked at for the last 7 years, called Cahill Contractors. And I started as a project engineer for general, Cahill was a general contractor. And that was great. I mean, the experience of being on a big job site and learning how things are built and the process and the technical skills of like, how do we put plaster on a building? Like, how do we waterproof this type of condition? How do we install windows? What's the sequence of putting a floor in? Or what's the sequence of doing any number of possible things you can think of? That experience was just invaluable. And I always felt that if I worked for a big general contractor, I could basically do anything else I wanted within the construction or built environment, because at the basis of it all, you need to know how to build. Like even architects, anything within the built environment, if you know how to build and know that process and know like the key players, it kind of just lends itself to doing anything else within the industry. So it's kind of my, I didn't actually love that job, but I knew that I was getting really, really important technical building experience working for a big general contractor. So 7 years of that. And I wanted to do something a little bit more creative and collaborative because, and I explained this to Zoe when we met, but the construction industry or buildings in general, it's a triangle. It's the owner, the architect, and the contractor. So you can work in any one of those spheres if you want to be in the building industry. And so, I was working for the contractor, but I now moved to doing something where it's design build. So it's both the architect and the contractor in one. So the company is a lot more creative, and just a different type of person is drawn to a design environment versus potentially kind of a hardcore construction environment. So yeah, and I've been doing this for a little while, and it's really fun. It's different clients depending on the type of construction that you do, and just a ton of personalities, and that's what I love. So for me, it's been really fun. And yeah, I got, how did I get where I am today? I don't know, just speak up for myself, make sure people know, what I want and what I'm looking for out of a job, and find the people who can give that to me, I guess. So, and then you said, Jonathan, you asked how much day to day is spent on site traveling versus in office. It really depends on the type of construction that you're doing and what the role is. We were talking earlier, like construction is a very broad term. There's all different types of construction companies who specialize in all different types of things. There's different consultancy companies, from waterproofing to lighting design to, gosh, you name it, geotechnical. I mean, anything you can think of, there's a specialty. And so in my role as a project manager, and as a project manager, a project engineer, and then an assistant project manager, and then a project manager, the way that it worked at my old company was, as a project engineer and as an assistant project manager, you were on site full time. You had to be in the trailer. You're really kind of the backbone of the project, and like kind of boots on the ground. You have to really be able to see things. Very difficult to explain in just words, something that you need to be able to see to understand, especially with less experience, because someone may say, oh, that rabbit on that door frame is too far forward. And it's like, what does that mean? You have to kind of have that experience seeing it in the field to really understand. So, again, when I was younger, more in the beginning of my career, I was on site all the time. And for me, that was fine because I chose a company that was only in the Bay Area. So I selected a company knowing that I would only have to work in San Francisco or Oakland, which is a big consideration in terms of working for a construction company, is where do they do their work and what's their clientele. If their clientele is all in Silicon Valley, well, then you're going to be in Silicon Valley a lot, because it's impossible to do this job. And I would say most jobs within the built environment without actually physically being on the job site. So, and then what's typical work week in hours? The line you would probably get from most people is that construction is a ton of work and you're there all the time. And I think that really depends on the culture of the company that you're working for. There are a lot more like hardcore general contractors where you really are expected to be there from like 6 to 6 every day, 6 to 7, or until the work is done. The company I worked for was much more family oriented. They never wanted people working late. And I think that has its great benefits, because I think when people are not working as much, they do better work, they're more productive, because they feel like they can have the bandwidth to do things outside of work. I'm someone who never has spent a lot of time working, but that's just me. I try to be as efficient as possible, probably to my detriment. But I used to work probably from like 7, it's early in the morning, 7 to anywhere between 3:30 and 5. But again, I'm like all about efficiency. So most people would probably work longer than that. But I've always been the one who can even in architecture school, I don't even think I pulled like one all-nighter, because I was like, I have to get this done the minute something is assigned. Like, I have to start right now, because I'm very crazy about time management. So it really depends on like your work style, the culture of the company, and the type of work that the company does, I think, in terms of like, work-life balance.
Thank you for that nice, complete answer. And I just want to open it up to anybody else who wants to ask. You can either unmute if you want to ask a question, or you can put something in the chat. And I have other questions that I can ask, but I just want to give everybody here a chance to ask anything that's on your mind. And you can just keep thinking about it. If anything occurs to you as Leah is talking, feel free to put it in the chat.
I've got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious, Leah, at what point, if any, do you have formal authority over the team that you're managing? I know you mentioned, starting as a PE and then an assistant PM, and then now you're a PM. I actually worked in technology before coming to Berkeley. And I know project managers like rarely, at least in technology, rarely have formal authority over any of their teams. So it's like you really need to rely on your soft skills, I guess, your ability to partner and communicate, to get at what you what you need out of your team. So is it similar in construction management?
On the general level, whoever is whoever is the entity in charge is the one who has the authority. Like on a construction site, the general contractor runs the show, and whoever is in charge on the side of the general contractor is the one that has authority. And I mean, there's different ways. Maybe, I don't know if you're meaning in terms of like your own personal team, or if you're talking about like generally on a construction site, where does the buck stop? But here you can, let me know.
Yeah, so like in technology, I think I understand what you're saying. You have like, project sponsor, you have a project champion, and those roles, I guess, could relate to, the superintendent is an example. But you, as a project manager in technology, it's still your responsibility to move issues along, to communicate the status of things, and sometimes getting time from those people that don't directly report to you, just as one small example, is difficult because they don't report to you. So they may just say like, oh, I don't have time for that. And so you really have to learn how to partner with people, because you can't force them to give you information or time.
Yeah.
But in construction, is it similar? Like, is it as important to develop these interpersonal skills and communication, and because you don't have the formal authority over, I understand maybe not the tradespeople, but yeah, I guess maybe just some more clarity, I guess, as to what the expectations are from you as a project manager, and whether or not you have, like, what authority does a project manager have?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the relationship side of it, I mean, it's obviously, I think any career or pathway, the relationships, and your demeanor have a huge impact on how people relate to you. I mean, I think that's an obvious statement, but in terms of authority within the construction business, it's very hierarchical. I mean, it's a very old school career. It's, a lot of people, become a carpenter or a superintendent because their great grandfather was a superintendent. And like my old company, it was multi-generational, a lot of guys kind of, and that's only to say that, within like the trades, for example, they're very much about who's the authority above who, like whoever is the authority you report to. And so in my role as a project manager, and I hope I'm explaining this correctly, because I think it really, really depends on your personality and the structure of the company that you work. But in a construction project, I mean, so you've got project engineer, assistant project manager, senior project manager, project executive, vice president, and maybe there's a little bit in there that's a one-off. But the project manager is in charge of the project, full stop. I mean, of course, senior project managers step in when issues arise potentially, or, depending on the, the level of, the project manager, may or may not help more or less, but the project manager is fully in charge of schedule management, cost management. I make decisions about, I'm sorry, my cats are fighting in the background. I don't know if you can hear that, but I'm fully empowered to make any decisions that I need to make. And ultimately, I'm the one who, controls what goes on, not only because I'm the project manager, but because I control the money and I decide who gets paid what we're going to spend money on. I'm the only person really that has a full understanding of what is the projection of the cost of the project. What are we projecting to make? And that's directly influenced by the decisions I make. So And there's a lot of management that goes into that. Obviously, I mentioned the positions below a project manager, they directly report to the project manager. And I would say the project manager is, the axis of the construction project. Senior project managers are involved, but depending on the company and the way that it's structured, they typically handle multiple projects, kind of putting out fires, showing up every once in a while, being a good face for the owner, checking in with the owner. But the project manager is like the person in charge of everything. And it's probably the hardest job in construction to be the project manager because there is so much pressure. I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm so great, I'm so responsible, but like it really is the most pressure because you're directly responsible for the bottom line of the company. But then there's lots of management opportunities. Again, I think it really depends on the culture of the company, how they treat people and how they, entice you to manage people. But ton of management on both sides. I mean, you've got a lot of people ahead of you, but you've also got a lot of people below you, and the laborers, carpenters, whatever, they know when I go on the site, I'm the project manager. I'm the one that ultimately decides how the project goes. So I don't know if that answered your question completely.
It does. It also sounds like it varies. So do you get to pick your team, or is your team assigned to you?
More and more, I think companies are trying to assign to at least assign smartly, but a lot of project management staffing just has to do with, okay, Leah's project is 2 years. She's going to be done in June. We got another project starting up in July. So Leah's going to start that project. And then, oh, this person's coming off a project too. We're going to throw them together. So I'm certainly one to really advocate for myself. And if I want something, I will make everybody know that like, that's my intention. And so like, if there is someone in my role, for example, that I want to work with, like I want that project engineer on my project, I could probably make it happen by sheer force of will and like just putting myself out there and saying like, I really want to work with Zoe. Like she's my girl, like put her on my project. But typically it's just kind of a numbers game in terms of, whatever is going on at that time with staffing, how many projects are going on, et cetera.
That helps. Thank you.
And then Noria, you asked about what it's like being a woman in this role. It's definitely can be difficult. And I think it depends on the type of construction. Again, like, if you're doing what I do now, which is I do high-end workspaces, which is typically kind of light touch, we call it. Like maybe you're moving a few walls, mostly new carpeting, new finishes, maybe a little plumbing, electrical, but it's a little more light touch. You're dealing with a very different cast of characters and a very different environment than you are working on a construction site where like it's just the construction team out there. It's you're working with people who are the bluest of the blue collar to like the whitest of the white collar and anywhere in between. So, my experience working in my current company is very different than working in my old company, which was much more traditional general contractor, and that's to say mostly white guys in their 50s running the show. And then like, I'm, one of the very few women. The experience is, I have so many stories of just crazy situations being the only woman, and not all bad. Like in a way, it's also nice to be the only woman because sometimes I like, I'm singled out. Like I get more attention. People take care of me. They, all the guys on the site make sure that I'm okay, and I'm kind of like their little niece or whatever, looking out for me. But there's the alternate side of it, of course, which is that being the only woman on a construction site can be very difficult. Yeah. And, I don't think that's the construction industry's fault. I think anything that's mostly men or mostly women is going to have its own environment. And again, if you're working with mostly blue collar people who many of whom did not graduate high school, did not go to college, they may have a slightly different perspective on a woman than other people might. And that's just kind of the reality of it. But I know for myself, and I think obviously we're talking a lot about these days about bias and inherent bias and all of that stuff. I think for the most part, 95% of people have their inherent bias. And then when they meet you within 10 minutes, they kind of see who you are. And then that kind of goes away. there's always that 5% that are going to hold on to this bias and see you in this perspective. But, you know, for myself, I've always really tried to be, as knowing that there may be this image of me kind of going into it, I always try to make sure that I gain people's respect by being outspoken and making sure that they are not thinking anything of me other than, wow, she really does her job well. And she's the one who knows what's going on around here. If you want to get something done, like go to Leah, she'll handle it for you. And, you know, maybe that's like more of a crutch that like, I feel like I have to overperform because I want to be seen as, you know, important and, you know, one of the people who are the movers and shakers on the construction site, but it's also just who I am. And that's kind of, you know, has made me successful in my own role. So I wouldn't say that like being a woman is necessarily a detriment. I think it's just going into it, you have to understand kind of what the scenario is going to be. And, you know, in my perspective, like I'm not there to change anybody. Yeah, if I get close to somebody and they say something, I'll be like, that's, you know, it's kind of inappropriate, just so you know. And it's actually a great opportunity to change minds because again, you're with a lot of different people with a lot of different political affiliations across the board. And it's kind of a great meeting place of just so many, I mean, people that I would never meet in my everyday life that I've had this opportunity to be very, very close to based on working in construction, because it's just people from all different aspects of the world. So, you know, it's just different every day. And I just try to be myself and try to be respected as much as I can. And also, you know, say it if I feel like I'm being disrespected and be very upfront and clear about that. Zoe asked, do you feel creatively fulfilled working alongside designers, but not necessarily being a designer? For me, I always say, like, I always think about my career in terms of like 3 things, which is, you know, am I making enough money? Do I like what I'm doing? And do I like the culture of the company? And do I feel like I like where I'm working? And I feel like working for a general contractor, I was kind of sacrificing maybe the creative part, which is like, I wasn't necessarily doing exactly what I wanted to be doing, a little less creative than I wanted to be, but I was, you know, construction is very well paying industry. So making enough money, and then the culture of the company was great. So yes, was I sacrificing a little bit of the creative side? Absolutely. But I was doing that in service of knowing that the experience I was getting working for a very large general contractor would eventually afford me the opportunity to do something more creative. So absolutely, like I think, you know, being a creative minded person and loving being at least in that environment, even again, if I'm not the one doing any of the creating, I definitely felt like a little out of place, but it was in service of kind of a bigger goal, which eventually like it's worked out so far. So, you know, it's just kind of like figuring out what that goal is and what's the easiest, you know, path of least resistance to get there. And yeah, sometimes that means kind of sacrificing what you're wanting to do, but it depends what you're wanting to do. I really wanted to make money. So yeah, I wanted to be a designer, sure, but I wanted to make more money than I wanted to be a designer. So for me, the sacrifice is kind of worth it. And, you know, hopefully in that ideal dream job, you have all 3 of those and, you know, you don't have to sacrifice, but sometimes, you know, a couple years, it's worth it to kind of get where you want to be. So.
I have a question. Besides the skills, you know, being outspoken, standing up for yourself, and the variety of other skills that you've talked about, what do you think are the most important skills that you know, that you'd say somebody has to have in your role?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the things that's like really not, it's kind of like under talked about is how social this industry is. And I think a big part of it has to do with like, it all revolves around the construction site and being physically in person to see what's going on. It's impossible to do this job from afar, at least completely. Like you have to be on the job site, at least in my role. I don't even feel comfortable if I'm not on the job site a couple times a week to see what's going on myself, because trust no one is like my favorite saying, at least in construction. Because like when someone tells you something, it may not actually be exactly like, you know, so I always like to see it. So the social aspect is super important. And it's, you know, buildings are built by people. There's no robots right now building buildings. I mean, in some cases there are, but like none of the big buildings that you see or none of the construction that we see is done by anything other than people, boots on the ground, hands-on hammers doing it themselves. So, you know, relationship building is literally everything. I mean, on a construction site, again, you could be working with 150 different people every day, and different people, you know, you have different people coming in and out every single day. So, you know, for me, I don't think I knew going into this how much my personality was going to play into my success, or how important that was going to be in my kind of happiness in the role. But, you know, it's always like, you can say like, oh, generally, this is what that job is. But like, when you really get down to it, like, what's the nitty gritty of that job? Yeah, okay, I'm a construction project manager, but what does that mean I'm doing? Really, it's that I'm on the phone a lot of the day. I'm working with people. I'm trying to, you know, charm people into doing something for me because I made a mistake and I'm groveling over it, or they didn't show up and now we're trying to figure out a solution together. Like, I'm always trying to get people on my team and getting them, you know, it's like nice guys finish first, in my opinion. Like, the nicer you are, the more favors people want to do for you, the better relationship you have, the easier your job becomes. And so those kind of like soft skills, I think, are really important in any career probably, but particularly where you're relying on human bodies to create a product and those people being where you need them to be at any specific time. I don't think I realized how important that was going to be. And I've definitely made my fair share of mistakes in getting in arguments with people who I should not have been arguing with, and hear it go around the company because I got in a fight with someone, you know, oh, you did get in a fight with that person yesterday? Like, how did you know that? You know, it's the head of the company. I'm, you know, 20, like fighting with this guy. So I've learned again and again and again how important those relationships are. It's a very, very small industry. You end up working with the same people over and over again. So I don't think I realized like what a people person you have to be really successful at this.
Hello, I have a question. My name is Ab. I'm a senior student studying architecture. I'm applying for master's in construction management in Columbia, NYU, and the University of Washington, Seattle. I wonder if you have any suggestions of which school is better.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't go to grad school. So
Okay.
I think anything that gives you practical experience would probably be the best. You know, again, like it all happens on the construction site. Like, a book is not necessarily going to teach you what you need to know to make deals, negotiate, see an issue and solve an issue, you know, right there, getting the right people together. Like, okay, drywaller, come here, painter, come here, flooring guy, come here. Let's talk right now about how we're going to fix this problem, you know? That's just kind of stuff that, so I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with like master's programs or what would be better, but I would just suggest going to school in the place. Oh, I think we lost him. I was gonna say, suggest going to school in the place that you want to work, because that will probably have a big impact on the construction process.
I think he disappeared. But that actually gets at sort of the question that Jonathan was asking earlier about grad school and the value of grad school versus experience. Jonathan, I don't know if you want to restate your question, or Leah, if you want to just jump in about this.
It looks like Ab's back, so.
Oops, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Went out for some reason by mistake.
I was just saying my only word of advice would probably be to go to school in the place that you want to practice your career. So, you know, relationship wise and also just process wise, probably construction is probably quite different in different countries.
Yeah.
I was thinking Columbia like the country. You mean Columbia? Like
no, the university.
I was just visited Columbia a couple months ago, so I have it on the brain.
Okay, nice. So yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the meeting. You said you're a licensed construction manager?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, Jonathan had asked, I think along the lines of, he was thinking about going to grad school for construction management, and I guess my thoughts on that, I gave my thoughts even if he hadn't asked for them. But I was saying that, you know, I think it's a question of like, are you going to be gaining more in the years that you're in school versus the experience you can get in those few years. Like 2 years in a construction role may be more valuable than 2 years in school, because even out of school, you're still don't have that practical experience depending on the program. And you know, construction luckily is not one of the careers that you have to go to school for. For project management, it's easier to get into it, but it's not required. So, you know, I don't know. I actually don't think I know anybody who went to grad school who is currently a project manager that I know. Or a senior project. I don't think I know anybody who went to grad school and is successful in a construction career, but depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, that's really actually useful. Thank you. If I don't get admitted, I mean, my plan was to work, like just take school as part-time and then work full-time, since I don't even afford like paying for tuitions without working.
That was always my thought, was that school is just so expensive.
Yeah.
Like the amount that you're going to have to work to make up for that cost completely outweighs. I mean, it's great. Yeah. It's great to have it on your resume, but if you have a bachelor's degree already, that's really all you need in a construction field.
Okay, thank you.
At a maximum.
Great, we got that answered. Does anybody else have a question that you'd like to ask? Are there any people who specifically have influenced you, Leah, that you feel like have made a big difference in your career as you've moved along?
You know, no, not really, especially because I went to school for architecture. I was not very familiar with construction. I just kind of dove into it knowing that it was more lucrative actually, and just I knew I'd get great experience. As a kind of like now in the middle of my career, you know, more senior level, I'll say, having a mentor, you know, especially a female mentor, a woman who works in construction who can like just be a kind of a sounding board has been immensely helpful. And especially in my case, because there are so few women in construction, but a mentor, you know, someone who's, you know, can help you talk through career options, who has the experience, I think is invaluable, but no one in particular that's, you know, like helped me other than that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, but it's the idea of having a mentor. I mean, it's a good
it's incredible. Everyone should have a mentor. Anybody. I mean, yeah, it's invaluable.
So you have a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find her?
My company, so there's a women in construction group in the Bay Area, which you probably know already, and they're great. But that's just a suggestion for people who aren't working in the field already. But at my company, they started a mentorship program for women specifically, because again, there are so few of us. And that was where I met my mentor. And it just so happened that she was leaving the company when she became my mentor, which in retrospect was great because I could really talk to her about what was going on and not feel like it's kind of in you know, a mouth right back to the company. So, you know, and people want to be helpful. People really like to help other people and feel honored to be asked to help. So, I mean, obviously I'm doing this, so I like helping, and everyone feels that way. They like being the expert. They like providing advice. So I would just recommend, if you know someone or, you know, reach out. People want to be helpful. And I think it's anybody you talk to. I've never, ever been upset when I've reached out to someone and said that wasn't worth it. I mean, even randomly on LinkedIn, you know, reaching out to people, even if 1 out of every 10, I've had great conversations, you know, that have really helped me. And so it's always worth it to put yourself out there.
Are there any aspects of your job that you really don't enjoy? How have you managed to work through those parts?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm, you know, I think kind of going back to Zoe's question, like, you know, you have a creative mindset and then you're in a career potentially that's not creative, or not immediately creative. You know, and I don't love a lot of the administrative things that come along with a corporate job, you know, I mean, I don't love doing any sort of like data entry or keeping track of like random invoices or, you know, there's lots of it I don't like. And so the way that I've worked on that is just trying to get promoted as quickly as possible so I don't have to do the things I don't want to do. You know, get through it, learn it, and then hopefully move on. So I don't have any like specific advice other than like sometimes you're paying your dues and experience, and it's worth it because then you get to do what you really want to do. But yeah, sometimes you do have to do those things, but that's every job. There's always going to be things you don't want to do in your career. I mean, as long as you can minimize, you know, as long as there's not too much of it, that you're still getting to do what you want to do. For a construction manager in the, oh, sorry, Zoe, you asked first. Would their architecture be, you know, there's actually a good amount. I think I always thought having an architecture degree was going to be, yeah, perceived like negatively, but generally most construction project manager roles, they say a BA, like architecture or civil engineering, or I guess that's a BS. I thought I was going to be at a big disadvantage. And maybe I was. I mean, to be perfectly honest, when I started, I did not know anything about construction. I mean, less than anybody here, I probably knew nothing about construction. And, you know, I think one of the things like as an architecture student, I could have done, which I didn't have the opportunity to do, what I would have done in retrospect, had I thought about it, is get internships and the careers that I wanted to be doing. You know, like get an internship in construction, and then at least you have that on your resume. But again, it's just the bachelor's degree. Like no construction companies expect you to know how to build a building coming in. That's like a big like misnomer, I feel like. You don't have to know how to build a building to work in construction. You have to learn how to build a building, and we're always learning. You know, there's so many different situations that come up. And then what's the pay like for a construction manager? It probably really depends on what type of construction you're doing, what the industry is specifically, but generally really high. I mean, construction is an extremely lucrative career or business, not necessarily career, but it's a lucrative business, especially on the general contractor side. And there's a lot of reasons that go into that, which I won't necessarily like go into why construction manager roles pay more. But I don't know. I think it depends on also the area. Like in San Francisco, like I know the starting salary for a project engineer is like $95K. I mean, you know, I think for an entry level role, I mean, I don't know. I started doing this 10 years ago. So now that sounds like a ton of money. That may not be a ton of money to everybody else, but if I was making that in my first job, I would have been, you know, really happy. But it's all different now, right? Like inflation and what people make is really different. But yeah, you should look online because it really also matters where you're working. You know, San Francisco is one of the most expensive places in the country. So you're making more here than you would making in like Minnesota. So
I just put in the chat where you can research salaries on the Career Central website, and you can look according to location and that kind of a thing as well. So I just want to, at this point, ask you, Leah, if there's any advice that you have for students who are considering moving in this direction, if there's sort of essentials in terms of getting experience, cultivating certain skills, anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, I would say that I think an internship is a really great place to start. And I think there are so many different jobs within the construction industry that like you may not even know about, you know, from a waterproofing consultant to again, I said lighting designer. Like there's tons of different things that are involved in making a building. And I think like getting that kind of experience where maybe you're working for an engineer and how do they interact with the job site, right? Like a structural engineer, they have some impact on the job site. They're there maybe once a month, whereas a construction manager, you're there every day. And I think like any opportunity to understand that ahead of time or shadow someone who's on a construction site gives you at least a little eye into what that really is like. It's certainly not for everybody. And again, I wish I had interned when I was younger. So I would say just getting as much and talking to as many people as possible, getting as much information. It's a very, very vast industry. And there's like so many different opportunities. And I think just exploring those kind of like in a hands-on way.
Thank you. Yeah, so getting experience, talking with people, doing informational interviews, maybe an externship, whether it be through the Career Center or even proposing to somebody, asking if you could shadow.
And yeah, I mean, I know it's one of the hardest things to do is to reach out to people and you don't really want to, but if you put yourself out there, you will get so much out of it, even if it's randomly on LinkedIn, a friend of a friend, or someone who has the job that you want. People want to help you, and you might be rejected in some cases, but okay, that's the worst thing that can happen. Just, yeah, putting yourself out there and talking about what you want and what you're looking for and what your skills are and advocating for yourself is, I mean, the amount of people that don't advocate for themselves is insane, because it's like people feel like things should just be handed to them. And in some ways, maybe they should. But if you just say what you want and you tell everybody, hey, this is what I want to be doing, you will get it. And you'll find out a lot along the way. So
Yeah, and if you don't know what you want yet, I put in the chat the link for informational interviewing, so you can ask people what's it like, just like we're doing right here. This is essentially an informational interview in a group setting, right? So you can reach out to people on LinkedIn, and through the Berkeley Career Network, it's another resource. And if you want help with that process of like, okay, how do I reach out to people? What do I say to them? You can look online, but you can also make an appointment with me, or if you're not a major within CED, you can make an appointment with an LNS or other counselor. And so yeah, there's great ways to get information without having to even get an internship. But an internship, obviously, you have sort of a period of time over which you can learn a lot and make connections that are a little bit deeper, So we're coming to the end of our time, and I just want to put out a poll. It's a very simple poll. And so I'm just going to launch it. If you can respond to it, I'd really appreciate it. There's just 3 questions. The first one, whether you're more likely to reach out to, does everybody see this? Yeah, good. Okay.
So, sorry, can I
More likely to reach out to working professionals and conduct informational interviews.
Jonathan had a question.
Oh, Jonathan, yes.
Hi, Leah, sorry, I had to step away for half a second, but I saw someone asked about a starting salary. So did you answer that, or?
Yeah, I think Denora had a good point that, like, I think you can look that stuff up super, super easily. And like, I don't want to say what it may or may not be. And again, like, I can't believe what people are making today as compared to what I was making 10 years ago in that role, so look at the different general areas. Again, it's really going to differ based on the sector of construction and then where you're working. Again, a more expensive city, you're going to be making more.
Based on your experience, though, is there a focus area that generally is more sought after and people might want to think about gravitating towards? Like
sought after in terms of like jobs people are wanting to do?
Or just a specialization within the field, like bigger contractor versus smaller, or type of construction, or I don't know. Just any.
I don't know. I think it really depends on your preference. I mean, like, some people like residential construction, right? Like, it's fun to build homes. There's positives and negatives to that. The negative is that you're working with a homeowner who potentially could be extremely demanding and it's their home. The positive being that you're getting to build something for someone and you're getting to see that product and that person enjoy that space. So I really don't think there's any particular preference. I think it really depends on the kind of environment you want to be in and the kind of clients you want to work with, because the client is going to really impact your experience in the field.
Yeah, it's going to depend on your priorities.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jonathan. So if you haven't answered the question, I think we have maybe one more person who hasn't answered the question. If you can do so, that'd be great. Or the questions, the poll. And I just want to thank you, Leah, so much for taking the time to meet with us. And I'm just gonna, I guess let me share the results. Just realized maybe you haven't seen the results. It's not like a big deal, but so people seem to be more likely overall to reach out, to do informational interviews, feel like gain knowledge. So thank you for filling in a lot of knowledge, and are more likely to attend another career chat. So that's great. And just one sec. Okay. I'm just going to come back here and close this and say sorry for that. But thank you so much. Really appreciate it. It feels like it went by really fast. And it's just so helpful that you are very, very, comfortable speaking with us and sharing your experience. I'm sure the comfort level that you're showing here reflects your comfort with, in your role where you have to be outgoing, where you have to speak with different kinds of people. So this has just been really interesting, and hope to see you again at some point.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for participating and asking your questions. And let me ask, Leah, is it okay if people reach out to you on LinkedIn? Say, is that a good?
LinkedIn is a good way to reach out. I'm not like, I think I'm just one, place where you can hopefully get information, but I think like what you would do with me, you could do with so many different people. And so you're more than welcome to reach out on LinkedIn, but I would also encourage do that with a ton of different people and start to network in that way, because LinkedIn is so great and so helpful.
Thank you. And I can show you guys, if you want, how to find people that you want to talk with on LinkedIn. So you can
I still do that all the time.
Yeah.
I'll reach out to people randomly on LinkedIn, and I've made so many great connections on LinkedIn, like different people, all different industries. And it's really come back it's in so many ways to be helpful. Just yesterday, I had someone reach out to me at LinkedIn and asked me if I was interested in a couple positions there. And she's just a random woman I reached out to at LinkedIn, the company, not the website. Anyway, that's confusing.
But yeah, exactly. Just a very good point about ongoing career management.
Yeah,
is connecting with people, not just arbitrarily, but that people like to talk about what they're doing. They like to help each other.